I'm Chef Spero. I'm the chef and owner of Reverie restaurant here in Georgetown. The dish we're going to prepare for you right now is something that's currently on our menu. It's one of my favorites. If I could open a only seafood restaurant, I would. This is Spanish turbo. So this comes from a farm in Spain. It reminds me of my time spending, a year in San Sebastian, where you go to these restaurants and they would fish these massive turbo out of the water, throw it over top of the grill, and cover it with garlic and olive oil, and that's it. Our version is a little bit more elaborate, but takes the same inspiration from that. So we've taken this beautiful turbo, taken it off the bone, and then we skewered it so we can cook it directly over the coals. I think one of the most common mistakes for a lot of professional and amateur cooks is that they just throw fish directly on the grill and it just destroys it. Some fish work really well, some don't. The turbo does really well, just kind of gently resting over top of the coals. You'll see us cooking on our little Japanese Konro grill, and it's just a more delicate way. Going along with that is preserved lemon. So this is actually an accident. We ordered like 3 cases of lemons. And rather than returning it, we just juiced them, salted them, and let them kind of go for about a year and blended it. So it adds a nice little bit of acidity to a very rich fish. As it's getting grilled, we call this tomato Marmite. Marmite is delicious. It's usually the byproduct of making a lot of like yeast. So it's kind of acidic. My Australian friend turned me on to it when I was living in Spain. She used to make us cheese and Marmite sandwiches. But we've reduced about 50 pounds of tomatoes into about 2 containers of this size, so from a lot to nothing, with roasted yeast and soy sauce. So we'll glaze the fish and we'll just give it a nice little bright pop of acidity, a little bit of crunch. It almost looks like Japanese glazed eel at a certain point, but it really adds another depth of flavor. Really bright herbs from our farm. So inside here we have a mix of dill, bronze fennel, lemon verbena, sorrel, 8 or 9 different things. And this is kind of the fun thing about our restaurant, is that we're always kind of in flux and changing. Like, a dish will be different even in the same night from one table to the next, depending on how much of something that we have. In addition to all that already delicious stuff, we have a butter sauce that we've made with dashi. Dashi is the base of a lot of Japanese stocks and soups. And then we have a really intense herb oil. It's super bright green. There's probably about like 4 pounds of parsley and dill in here. The fish is really fatty. A lot of elements that gotta bring some floral brightness to it. So we're gonna start cooking it. Before we put it on the grill, we'll give it a quick little glaze in the Marmite. We'll paint it on there using a paintbrush just to kind of spread it around, make sure it's not dripping off too much. It will burn pretty easily because of how heavily reduced it is. And just a little bit on the skin. This is the belly side, so the idea is not to get it crispy. We're gonna take it over to the grill. And we're gonna start skin side down, just gently laying it over top of our coals. So again, this is the Japanese Konro grill using Japanese charcoal. You could do this over a Weber grill. You can cook turbo in a pan, but this is my over an open fire, so I prefer to cook most of my proteins anyway. And it won't take long. It's a thin fish, especially being on the belly. You'll notice it's not like a nice, big, thick fillet. And we're gonna wanna keep moving it back and forth just so it doesn't burn. One side has a lot more coals piled up, the other side is a little lower. That way we can regulate the heat a little bit, just like you would in a grill when you're cooking steaks. You always tend to have a really hot side and a colder side, so you can see it's starting to flare up, the fat's starting to drip down. And we'll just keep flipping it over. We can reapply a little bit as we want. And you want that char. There's a difference between burning and caramelization and char, so this is control. We're not just gonna let it sit on one side. And while our fish is cooking, we'll get our sauce heated up. It's already been made. We blend the dashi with the butter and a little xanthan gum, which is commonly used in a lot of cooking nowadays, but you'll find it in like the ingredients, a lot of your salad dressings. It holds vinaigrettes together. What it does, it holds this really tight emulsion. If anybody's ever tried to make a butter sauce at home, you'll probably know that it's hard. You have to slowly and just kind of gently touch it, make sure you don't break adding too much butter at once or too much acidity. But this is just kind of bulletproof. It also allows us to bring it up to a little bit higher temperature. So we're just gonna set that on low and just kind of let it get a little warm. We're gonna keep glazing our fish. Slowly moving it back and forth, but this does kind of remind me of like the way my dad would do barbecue chicken. He would just cover it in like barbecue sauce and just burn the hell out of it. But so if he saw me doing this, he'd be like, that's how you do it now. He's like, that's how I did it when I was younger. He always told me I was burning it. This is intentional. His was not. We'll take it, the nicer looking piece. I mean, they both look nice because I cooked them. So this is really, really rich. We'll take our lemon puree. Again, it is just all the lemons that we salted and we ran into a food processor just to make a really nice, smooth puree. You also notice that I didn't salt any of the fish. There's enough soy and enough salt in this that outside of maybe potentially adding a little bit of finishing salt, I don't want to muck it up and build up too much. This lemon will add a lot of brightness, but also it'll add the salt that we want, and it's also more consistent because it's covering the entire fish as opposed to like a heavy hand of salt. And then basically building a nice herb salad on top. So this is really bright and kind of help cut through the really rich sauce. These are really beautiful. They're only in season a little bit. It's garlic chive flowers. And one big thing at Reverie is that we like sauce. So we plate most of our proteins on the side. That way there's room for us to put our sauce. So our butter sauce is nice and hot. Then we'll add our herb oil. So rather than mixing this in the beginning and just having a green sauce, having besides the visual of it just looking really beautiful, having the herb oil float on top, it changes the way that you taste it, so the herbs are more pronounced and flavorful. This is our Spanish turbo with dashi, dill, preserved lemon, and bright herbs.